Organisations are linguistic structures built out of words and maintained by conversation. Even problems that aren't strictly communication, such as failures of mechanical systems, can be explored in terms of things said and not said, questions asked and not asked, conversations never begun or left uncompleted, alternate explanations not discussed. Walter Truett Anderson. Truett Anderson was an American author and thinker known for his work on cultural change and transformation. I'm Karin.
And I am Nuala, and we are the Safety Collaborators.
Our mission is to help people have better conversations and change the way they think about safety. Consider us your thinking partners, sharing expertise and wisdom in everything safety, safety culture, and psychological safety.
Today we start a journey into the linguistic acts, the construct of language. As I mentioned last week, this is a topic I am most intrigued with and I want to know more about. The joy of working in a team is not having to know everything and not knowing everything, and the ability and willingness to learn from and with each other. We have a strong learning culture, and today we will learn together and explore the constructs of language. Karin, where did this journey start?
I first came across the term linguistic acts during my ontological coaching studies, which I started way back in 2013, and it's had my attention ever since. I must admit, I remember thinking, why wasn't I taught this stuff at school? FYI, I still don't think it's taught at school. However, it's part of what we say our way of being. It's important to note that the phenomena of language is as important as listening, our moods and emotions.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because that's quite interesting. We talk about listening, moods and emotions. So it's not just words that comes into it.
No, the premise of ontological coaching, if you like, and the word ontology is all about the scientific study, actually, of what it means to be human, and more specifically about our way of being. And if you think about those terms, and we're not going to talk too much about that, but when we talk about way of being, we talk about it in the confines of language, moods, emotions, and the body.
Interesting.
Yeah, so particularly in our current modern world, we do a lot of speaking, not always so great at the listening bit. We say people are moody or emotional, and we very rarely consider that the body has anything to do with it. Now, lots of new research is coming around about even what we eat impacts all of those elements I just mentioned. So when we talk about language and moods, emotions, and the body, language is really where we're going to focus today. We talk about moods, emotions, and the body in other episodes. Language is much more than just, and I don't mean the language we speak. I don't mean whether it's French, German, English, whatever. In fact, the construct of language or the linguistic acts apply to everybody on the planet. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, whether you can read and write or not, interestingly. So it's not about the written word so much. There's a lot more to it.
And as we often say, nothing happens without a conversation. And language is a function to creating the world that we want to see and generating the realities that we live in and how we work together. But as you were speaking there, it just so encapsulated for me why we say when we look at safety and we look at what we do around organizational safety culture, we look at emotional, we look at physical, and we look at psychological. It's not just one element and one level. It encapsulates all of this. And as you're talking about the construct of language and mood and emotion and body, I'm going, of course, yes. I mean, this is what we do in so many ways. Like, da-da, little light bulb above my head.
One of our favourite words, communication, when we ask people, so where do you think there's a challenge? Oh, it's in communication.
What?
And that means what exactly? When we think about how we communicate and the construct of the language that we use to communicate, we start with two key questions. So first of all, why do we communicate with each other in the first place? And how effectively do we use language in our communication? So I'm going to ask those two questions again because I think they're worth pondering. Why do we communicate with each other? and how effectively do we use language in our communication? So communication is such a big word, and it isn't just about the moment.
No, or the verbal.
So our questions might be, well, what might be the response to your first question?
So why do we communicate with each other?
Yeah.
I suppose if I'm thinking in a work context, it might be to get results, to get things done, to share what's expected, to share information. Generally, to kind of get an outcome of some sort or another, I suppose, whether it's at work or at home, or in our personal context, it's to move forward.
Exactly. So we're inviting you to think about that question as well, you, the listener, that is, because really it impacts every facet of our lives. We're going to probably say this term quite a bit. Nothing happens without this phenomena called language. So, you think about you having an intimate conversation, you're having a safety conversation, you're having a whatever. They apply to everything.
Yeah.
So the purpose today is not to dive too deeply into the science, but rather give everybody a little bit of a high-level understanding of what might these basic linguistic acts be. Now, this is from my ontological studies. We talk about it from our learning about communication. We are not linguists. This stuff is something where everybody practices one way or another every day. It's about the quality, maybe, that we can improve upon.
Yeah, and how that might impact, our conversations and the way we're communicating for safe, better, efficient operations and building trust.
And my other favourite thing, how do we reduce that conversational waste? Let's dive in a little bit here now, and I'm just going to quickly go through the words and then we'll take a bit of a deeper dive into each of them. So we talk about assertions, and assertions in a more common word is assumptions that we make. We talk about declarations, which are the statements that we make, and that's an interesting one. We'll come back to these in a minute. Assessments, these are, you could say, our judgments and opinions. And then we have something called requests and offers and promises. Generally, we request something from someone, or we make an offer to someone or something, or in some shape or form. And then, of course, it's about the promises. So a promise is how we commit. So promises is really our commitments. What are we committing to in the act of that conversational language or language act?
Interesting.
So let's go back to assertions. I remember years ago, it used to be the second slide in our slide deck.
Oh, I think I know exactly which one you're talking about.
It's that circle with the no-go zone, us out of you and me, when we make assumptions. Maybe the nicer word's assertions. So what is an assumption? So most people just think it's really hard to actually now say assumptions without just using the word assumption. But anyway, But when we talk about assertions, they are all about you, the observer. So if you think about you as a being, the world that we see is based on our observations. So every person on the planet could be looking at exactly the same thing and they will observe it differently. Which if you think about that from a safety perspective, that is a phenomenon in itself.
It just opens a can of worms potentially because I'll be looking at, I love those illusion graphics where just because of the color it looks like a different height or a different depth. Are you looking at the number 6 or are you looking at the number 9? Depending on where you're standing, you're still correct. You're just viewing it differently.
Indeed. The world is but an illusion. So as an observer, we report on what we observe and we make an assumption about what we've observed, essentially. And that assumption, I'll stick with the word assumption for the minute, can be true or false, which I remember in our studies having fascinating conversations about this. And I used to use the term, the truth of the matter is, according to whom?
Well, exactly. Whose truth? From what angle? From what aspect?
These assertions can be true or false, and it's according to the accepted evidence that can be provided. So I guess if you think about this from, let's say you're doing a safety, a risk assessment. That assessment is based on a bit of evidence that's come through, or the group's assessment of what is a risk in that situation. So for that moment, that's a truth. But for another group of people, they may have a combined assessment of that risk and see it differently.
Did we not have this conversation with a client yesterday?
Yes.
Around risk tolerance, risk perception, understanding, are you scared of your shadow or do you see everything as an adventure that you should be leaping off? And where does that come in?
And it's about how we observe the world.
And bringing consciousness to that.
Indeed. It's interesting. Even as I'm speaking this and we're having this conversation, it's actually opening up a whole range of thoughts around the myriad of conversations we've had around this over the years. What's important here is that it's coming from within us. It's coming from our way of being, either as an individual or as a collective. I wasn't going to use the word way of being, but I'm going to bring it in after I change my mind. So they can be irrelevant or relevant as well. So I might make an observation about this. I mean, I have these conversations, and as you get older in life, there's a lot of things that people say. You just go, yeah, who cares, right?
The joy of wisdom.
So it depends on what concerns us. So concerns are what's important to us, what is as an individual or as the collective. So that's where that becomes an important construct, if you like. And when we talk about assertions, now I know that we said in the beginning that words create worlds. They do, but actually assumptions are world first because we've observed it first and then we add our words to it.
Ah, interesting.
Because then we describe it.
Yeah.
Because now we're describing the world that we see. Yeah, so there's a bit of a flip here.
You know, the picture of an infinity loop is coming to me.
Oh, that's interesting. I like that. So on one side, we're the observer.
The creator.
But then we move into the assessments. I'm going to skip over declarations. Then we start to make statements about what we've observed. And these are what we call declarations. Now, declarations can be a whole range of things. So our assertions are about world first. It's about what we see, and then we go into describing. And we do this through statements, if you like, and judgments and opinions. So these are what we call in the linguistic declarations and assessments. And assessments, or those judgments or opinions, are actually a form of declaration. So they are a type of statement. So if I make a judgment about something, I'm actually making a statement about something. So I'm making a judgment about that screen in front of me.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking of is that you are making a judgment and you are stating, this is my truth.
Yeah, or a version of, correct. Yeah, so it would seem.
Well, it's what I am seeing as my truth in the moment.
Yeah.
Can they be tested and changed and what have you? And I think one of the signs of learning and being open to growth is being able to be challenged and questioned and say, well, this is my assessment, my judgment, this is what I'm declaring, but I've now received new information. How do I then adapt?
We are assessment-making machines. We do this stuff all day long. It's part of being a human being. So we're making these judgments, we have opinions, and it's about anything. It could be about that other person, it could be about that wall over there, it can be that piece of kit over there, it can be the environment we're in. Then we've got to add in things like biases and all that sort of jazz. Not today. But that's where they come in, because then our biases, etc., are a part of this process. So when we make assessments, we tend to use our past experience in the present to guide us into the future. So we're making these states, so we've made some observation about something. We then make some sort of statement about it based on our past. So we could go into neuroscience now, which we won't, but based on our experiences and what we remember, what we think that is, a colour, In my experience, that particular thing over there is the colour red. But now it's got a different hue, so I'm not sure, or when somebody else will say, but that's not red. We hear it a lot with the blue-green things, right? Because other factors are getting involved. But, right? I mean, I struggle to see dark blue. To me, it often looks black, which is kind of interesting. So these assessments, when we're making these, and again, as I say, we're basing these judgments and opinions on something from our past. And our past could have been 2 minutes ago, right? Because that is the past. Then we're making that statement in the present, generally about something we want to see different in the future, which could be in the next minute.
That's really interesting. when you think about the flow and the kind of like how it happens, and it's built in, and it's also what keeps us safe.
Yeah.
Because we can't, in some ways, go around questioning absolutely everything.
For sure.
So
yes,
we have to question, well, how is this serving us?
Yeah. Yes.
Because if it's serving us well, and we are seeing what we want to see, and we are seeing the outcomes we want to see, well, then possibly our assertion, or our assumptions, our statements, and our judgments are good. But if they are not serving us, how do we challenge that? And actually, I was walking with another coach this morning,
Yes.
and she shared a beautiful example with me about how she gets her clients to stalk themselves. So
I love it.
I love it. So a little example was, she would say, okay, so you use the word but a lot. So this week, without judging yourself, at the end of the day, I just want you to consider, how many times did you use the word but? The next week, it is, okay, now I want you to catch yourself using the word but and change it to and, And the third week is, I want you to laugh at the frivolity of the fact that we still get stuck in the ways that we do things. And then it's working through that change. But yeah, so how do we stalk our assumption statements and judgments that are not serving us to be able to turn them into ways that are serving us?
I think that then goes into the broader context. So it's about the language that we use, but it's also how we listen. It's also how we, what mood are we in? What emotions are we living in at the moment? So mood and emotions are a bit different. And just for the audience, we say that the difference between a mood and emotion is much more in the moment. I see a snake, it scares me, I'm frightened, I get that emotion of fear, the snake disappears, that emotion's gone. A mood is something that happens to us repeatedly, and it becomes part of our embodied being. So we could be living in a mood of judgment. We could be living in a mood of anxiety, or a mood of abundance and curiosity. Right? These are all different moods.
Oh, I love that.
And I'm sure just as I said that, there will be people's minds going, I know that person. That's an anxious person. Oh, that's a mood. Or, he's a bit judgy, right?
Or a mood of appreciation. That person's always looking on the bright side.
Exactly. So, so that kind of the difference. But all of this is actually part of our body. And the body is actually... all of this is coming from within us. It's not external to us. Things aren't being actually done to us when it comes to what we're talking about here, about the statements we make, the declarations we make, the judgments and opinions that we have. They're coming from within.
Yeah.
And the body, every fibre, being, muscle of our body adapts to that. And that's why sometimes in coaching, we then will use physical movement to shift the way we think or say things. Why is our coach friend saying, stalk yourself around the butt? That didn't come out right.
So
The word but. Change it to and. Because it's an embodied habit. If you think about what's a habit is an embodied, repeated action that becomes part of who we are. Yeah. That's why it's so hard to change habits.
And it links back to the conversation that we had about neuroscience.
Yeah.
How that works in. And we will definitely explore that more in our upcoming podcast, because I think it is something that the research on it in the moment is just absolutely phenomenal. So yes, we did get the request.
It's fantastic.
To please do a bit more on neuroscience. We have heard you. Thank you very much. And we will be doing more on that. Thanks for listening. We are all about helping you. So why not drop us a line at hello@safetycollaborations.com and see what we can do for you. Back to the conversation. We've kind of explored assertions or assumptions and declarations or statements and assessments and judgments. What comes next?
So then is when you think about all of those things, they're part of who we are. Then we go down the road of asking people to do things for us, or offering to do things for people or for groups or the environment. So we're now going to go down into the next three of these linguistic acts: requests, offers, and promises. So a request is simply asking others for their cooperation, if you like, to help take some action that will enable them to take care of your concern or concerns. So what I mean by that is that cooperation could be in the form of support, assistance, help, whatever. Generally, that's what we mean. And it's in a cooperative state because there's a two-way dialogue around that. And towards, we're going to say betterment, but, it's towards some sort of action into the future that takes care of something. An offer, of course, is the reverse, but that's when we put ourselves forward as competent to take care of the other's concerns or needs. So when we make an offer, with that, there is this assertion that we are competent to do so. So this is where the assessments and assertions and declarations become important.
And we will be requesting of certain people based on our assertions.
Yes.
Declarations and assessments because we deem them to be competent to be able to help us.
Absolutely. That can be an incredibly dangerous place to go.
Yeah.
We see it in the workplace all the time. Because somebody comes in with a list of so-called skills or whatever it is that they've some learning, we make some assessments or judgments or assumptions that they are capable of doing everything in that sphere. And yet each individual task could be different. So one thing they could be really good at, but something else they may not. Although if you look at their CV, it's in the realms of what they're employed to do. So that's basically requests and offers. So the request is about asking for others, their cooperation to help you do something or take care of something.
And offers.
Or I'm putting myself forward because I think I have the capacity or the competence or whatever it is to be of assistance.
Are there particular elements to requests or offers?
There is, and there's some key things that you need to be able to make a request or an offer. And the two most obvious is you need a speaker and a listener.
Yeah, I suppose that makes sense. Whether it's verbal communication, written communication, hand signals, head nods, whatever it is.
Doesn't matter, all right?
It's between more than just me, myself, and I.
Yeah, although I have some interesting conversations, but that's okay. That's for another day, maybe a neuroscience conversation, but or psychological one, I'm not sure. But anyway, so the most obvious things, and we don't even think about that, right? But when you actually say it, you go, oh my God, we do. We need a speaker and a listener. And often the speaker in that very act, if I'm speaking and asking someone to do something for me, there is almost an inbuilt assumption that they would be able to. Now, whether they can or not is not the point. We think about leaders and teams now. It happens all the time. So we need a listener, we need a speaker. We could do a whole nother podcast just on listening, which we may. So there is something missing. In the onto world, we call it a breakdown, but it's not as in a broken thing. It just means that there's something missing. I need help with something, or I'm going to offer my help for something, right? And that something could be anything. It could be a maintenance question. It could be, do you want to go to the movies? It could be anything.
Could you get me a cup of coffee?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good example, actually. It requires some sort of future action. We need to do something into the future. So one of the interesting components of this, and there's about a dozen of them, is the conditions of satisfaction. So what are the standards? And this, for me, is a critical piece in this request offer.
You can't see my face, but my eyebrow just lifted.
Yeah. So how often do we, when we make a request of someone or make an offer about something, how often do we say, and this is to the standard I would like it to be done at?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I have a perfect example of that this weekend.
There we go.
So I have not been home for a few years to celebrate my birthday. And because I haven't celebrated with family and friends for a while, I thought, you know what, I'm going to actually do a lovely lunch at home. But because I'm only landing on Friday, everyone's arriving on Saturday, I'm going to get a caterer in to do it. And one of the items on the menu that was my specific highlight of the menu was pulled lamb Peters, Greek theme. Now, in my head, I'm thinking beautiful leg of lamb marinated in yogurt and garlic and mint, and then slowly cooked that the meat just falls apart. I ended up with a more tomato-based lamb stew.
Yeah.
It was lovely. It was tasty. It was flavoursome. It was not at all what I had pictured in my head.
No.
But I'd asked for a Greek lamb dish, and I'd said, something along like a nice pulled lamb. And that was it. I never said, this is the picture in my head.
No.
And the worst part is, she had actually said to me, is there anything specific that you want? And I was like, oh, it's pretty casual. Just make it really yummy. And that's what she delivered on.
Yeah.
It was very yummy, just not my picture.
So you start to see now, you think about that whole event. It's a great example of you made a whole bunch of requests, you got a whole bunch of offers, there was a whole bunch of statements and declarations being made.
And assumptions.
Yep, they were all there.
You can read my mind.
Yeah. So the conditions of satisfaction, let's take it to a workplace right now. One person is asking someone else to do something or to grab something. Now, often I think this gets accredited to bad communication, that lovely term, bad communication, or you weren't listening, or, that sort of thing. And it comes down to, was I clear in my request? Was I clear in what I wanted to have done? Time. What are the standards? What is the skill level we need? There's a lot that goes into this. Now, I'm not saying every time we speak we have to think about all of that.
No.
But it does take practice, and it does take practice to become more succinct, particularly I think when we're making requests, actually. Succinct, and when we're asking people to do things for us, that we're quite clear on what their expectation is. And there's a whole bunch of fears and stuff around this.
You have just given me another light bulb moment. One of the bugbears around observation cards is that something went wrong or an incident, it was poor communication. Or positive observation card, great job, good communication. And then when I'm on site, I go to people and I say, okay, well, what was good about the communication? And people don't actually know how to describe what was good.
They don't.
Because we don't understand the linguistic acts. And as we're going through this, I'm going, how can we help people understand this better in that environment? And maybe it is around actually, I'm not promising we're going to do this for this podcast, but to develop almost like a little, not a checklist, but a little frame of these are the things that help with good communication. So when you're putting together an observation card, so the rest of the organization can learn from it, good communication, the requests were clear. We clarified assumptions. We made sure we understood the standards of how the job was going to be done.
Perfect.
Put together like a little 5 or 10 thing to say, what was good about your communication so that other teams, and again what could we have done differently for a better situation? We could have had a more clear request that included X, Y, and Z. This would have helped.
Absolutely. Shared background of obviousness. I love that statement. What the hell does that mean? Just means we have shared meaning. It means that we understand what we're talking about. Now, of course, if you're used to working with people, sometimes a raised eyebrow is enough of understanding. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't mean, it's not about the written word necessarily or being clever in your use of words. It could be just, I can remember when I was working in Nigeria, the Nigerians are brilliant at whistling. And the other guy on the other end of the rig knows exactly what he's talking about.
Yeah.
We do it. We have body language. We have actions that we use that people start to understand each other. So shared meaning. Time frames. How often do we make requests or offers and don't put a time frame on it? What emotion and mood might be needed, what might be serving us, the mode. And this is sort of the mode of the request. Are you begging? Are you happy to make that offer? Or are you just doing it because you're just stuck and the other person looking at them, right? So is it about please? Is it a command? So the mode in which that request is made or the offer is made is also important. The context, of course, is it in a context that everybody understands? And then, of course, the body. What's the position of the body? What's the body portraying? So I might be saying, yes, I'll do that, but my body's going, flying whatevers. Yeah. And the shoulders are forward and the chest caves in.
I think that's a good idea, but my eyes are going, you've got to be kidding.
Exactly. So this is really what the requests and offers are. And we think about a generic structure of a request. It's a request that you do, A for me, according to B standards, for C reasons, by D time. So making effective requests, if you like, is about a way of being. So it's understanding that all of these elements work together. But then we have to respond.
And I think that's why I probably wasn't so surprised this weekend, and I wasn't upset.
Interesting.
When my pulled lamb was not what I had pictured it to be. Because as soon as I looked at it and I tasted it and I went, this tastes lovely. Nobody else knows what was in my head. And I took responsibility for not actually putting forward what was there. And I went, I'm going to let this go and I'm going to enjoy every moment of what is in front of me. Because I realized that I hadn't made a full request.
Yeah.
Without being able to put this wording to it. You've just given me the structure.
Exactly. And this comes with awareness. The more that we become aware of how we communicate, how we use our words, how we use our body in that process, understanding our moods and emotions and where they're serving us or not serving us, all of this is part of just getting on with life. Yeah. And of course, if we don't have any awareness of this stuff, then you might have got really angry.
Yeah, it would have spoiled the entire party.
Exactly.
Like, well, why did I bother?
Yeah, exactly. This one thing out of everything else that was amazing can be destroyed. And it does impact, and I think what you just raised is really important, this impacts the environment around you, meaning the people that are in it, the environment that you're in. So it's not just about you, it's about what else is going on around you and who else does it impact. And for the sake of what? Which is one of our favourite questions in this world. For the sake of what? So the action of making a promise or a commitment happens when we accept the request or make the offer. But we have choices. So if you think about this, if I use a request, a declaration of acceptance, so a statement to say that yes, or whatever the declaration is, that equals the promise. Or if I make an offer plus the declaration of acceptance or statement equals the promise. However, there are different possible responses. There's the obvious one. You can say yes or no.
Which I think is the harder one, to be honest.
Really, really hard. And no is an acceptable, legitimate response.
Yep.
And legitimate is an interesting word here because it actually legitimizes both players, both actors in this, right? We then have a counter offer or negotiation. So we can say, well, I will do that for you, but I can't do it today. Will it be okay to do it tomorrow at such and such a time? And of course, then it goes back the other way, that the person making the request might say yes or no, or come back with a counter. And that's okay, so long as there's some sort of clarity at the end. We then have commit to later. So that is, but I can't do it this week, it'll have to be next week. It's not about negotiation, it's actually almost a half a no for now, but yes, later.
And that can even be in a moment when someone walks into your office and says, I need to discuss blah, 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 blah. And you're allowed to go, I need to finish what I'm doing right now.
Absolutely.
And then I can give you focus time. Can we meet in an hour's time?
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And then my favourite is the slippery promise. So what's the slippery promise?
But when you told me about this, I was just like, oh my word, this is brilliant.
Yeah. It's those vague responses. We all know them. We've all done them. Where we're not comfortable in saying no or yes or negotiation. We'll just go, yeah, I'll get back to you a bit later about that and walk off.
Or yeah, that's a great idea. Totally. I'm in with you.
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah. You've got my support and nothing happens.
I'm going to give you an example. Let's talk about WhatsApp for a minute, right? And emojis. Unless there's a clear understanding what a thumbs up means to a request, because what could that mean?
Oh, you can get yourself in hot water and deep trouble.
It could mean, yep, I'll do it. Could mean, yeah, gotcha. Or it could mean, I read it. It could mean half a dozen different things. So unless there's shared meaning, it could walk into the realms of the slippery promise.
Oh, absolutely. I think the slippery promise actually causes more damage than a negotiation or a commit to later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it breaks trust. For me, that's the one that breaks the most trust.
One thing we didn't talk about today, because very important in this, is exactly that, is trust.
Yeah.
And trust, when we talk about the elements of requests and offers and those sorts of things, when we talk about trust, we talk about sincerity, competence, reliability and involvement. We don't talk about, well, I trust them because I know them and we've got history and whatever. That's nice, but that's a moral trust. When we're talking about to getting things done, being safe or whatever the case may be, we also have to think about, is this a sincere request?
Yeah.
Is there competence here? Is there true involvement in engagement?
Let's wrap it up there and, hand it back to you, the listener. And what we invite you to do is to pay attention to the words you use and consider When are you making assumptions or judgments? How is it serving you or not? How are you making offers and requests? And more importantly, what promises, so our declarations, are you making? Will you honor them, or will they fall into the realm of the slippery promise?
We will share the framework with you, so that will help you on your quest to pay attention.
Thank you for joining us today. It is always lovely to have conversations that matter. And for me today was really special because it helped me learn a bit more about the linguistic act, and I have had so many light bulbs switch on, and I hope you have too. Connect with us on our website, safetycollaborations.com. You'll find the show notes for this episode, and we'll share the framework around linguistic acts with you as well. Leave us a message on the chat, on our show notes page, follow us on LinkedIn. And if you've enjoyed this podcast and you've had a couple of light bulb moments, give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. It will go a long way to spreading the word. And share it with those people you work with that you go, this might just help us take the next level to being better, to being safer, and to being more efficient. Till next week, stay safe and stay well.